Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you all in this space. I'm Dr. Gerald Griffin, if you don't know me, and it's my joy and delight to serve as Hope College's provost. In my role as Chief Academic Officer, I have many opportunities to witness how personal experiences and stories of faculty, staff, and students beautifully weave into the fabric of our holistic approach to academic preparation. Let me share one example of my own in relation to our virtues or practices of civil discourse. I remember singing a song growing up in my family church in Phoenix City, Alabama, and the verse would repeat, "I'll go if I have to go by myself. I'll go if I have to go by myself." See, this song spoke to a personal commitment to follow the course God had crafted for you. Our virtues of public discourse call us to have a personal commitment to practice, to work hard at them every day. And yet there is a subtle difference. Here at Hope, we learn, we practice in community. In fact, the preamble, if you will, to the virtues starts off with, and I quote, "Hope students and faculty are committed to exploring together." See, we don't have to go by ourselves on this one. And yet, our virtues say even more about our commitment to learn as a community. As a member of the Hope community, you will have opportunities to practice these virtues as you participate in our campus discussions, whether in the classroom or in conversations or during public events like the one we're having right now. I go so far to say that our virtues require us to go together as we, one, work hard to have humility to listen to God and one another. Two, practice every day to showcase hospitality that welcomes. Three, pause in daily conversations to grow in patience to understand. Four, walk daily with the courage to challenge ourselves and others. And fifthly, and envelope our thoughts, words, and deeds with the honesty to speak truth in love. This afternoon, let us listen and engage with Reverend Dr. Willie Jennings with these practices in mind as we honor a beloved professor, social justice champion, and a deep, true friend of mine, Dr. Charles Chuck Green. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Welcome to the 6th Annual Green Lecture on Faith, Race, and Community. My name is Casey Stevens, and I have the privilege of serving as Associate Dean of Integrative Learning and Director of the Phelps Scholars Program here at Hope College. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you to each of you for being here today. We have been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time and are eager to welcome the Reverend Dr. Willie Jennings in just a moment. Before that, though, I have the honor of offering acknowledgments and gratitude in anticipation of our talk today. And I'd like to begin that, if you would join me, by respectfully acknowledging the land that we are on and its original stewards. And so please join me in acknowledging that we gather on the ancestral lands of the Odawa, Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and other Anishinaabe peoples who have lived in relationship with this land for generations. These lands were forcibly taken during a period of European colonization in the mid-19th century, and we recognize not only the painful history of displacement and violence, but also the resilience, strength, and continuing presence of the Anishinaabe people whose connection to this land remains strong. In honoring their enduring relationship with these territories, we also acknowledge our responsibility to learn from their wisdom and stewardship, to listen to their stories, and to recognize the significance of their cultural contributions. So as we stand on this ground today, this sacred ground today, we commit ourselves, if you will join me in that, to the care of the land, of respect for its original stewards, and the cultivation of reciprocity and interconnectedness with all living beings here. And so I pray and hope that you will join me in this prayer, that our collective acknowledgement might prompt us to move beyond words and into meaningful action toward justice, healing, and shared responsibility. In 2019, the Phelps Scholars Program and the American Ethnic Studies program launched the Green Lecture on faith, race, and community. And this lecture is an annual address that seeks to engage the relationship between those three themes together. Again, those themes of the Christian faith, of race, and of community. The lecture is named in honor of Dr. Chuck Green, who is a retired psychology professor and founding director of the Phelps Scholars Program, and who, for his nearly 4 decades as a professor at Hope College, advocated tirelessly for and taught about inclusion and advocacy during his time as a professor and as director of the program. And so if you would please join me in thanking Dr. Green, as well as his wife Fonda, who are both here today, because we know that advocacy doesn't happen alone. So thank you. I would also like to thank Mr. Daryl Shredardis, whose generosity supports the Phelps Scholars Diversity Lecture Series and therefore the Green Lecture, and also the Office of the Provost and Provost Dr. Gerald Griffin, and the American Ethnic Studies Program and its program director, Dr. Matt Jansen, as well as the faculty and staff of the Phelps Scholars Program who helped to make this event possible. Thank you to each of you. And please join me in welcoming Dr. Matt Jansen, who will introduce today's speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Casey said, my name is Matt Jansen, and I am an assistant professor of American Ethnic Studies here at Hope College, where I direct the American Ethnic Studies program and serve on the leadership team of the Phelps Scholars Program. It is both my honor and a very heartfelt joy to introduce our speaker for the 2024 Green Lecture on Faith, Race, and Community, the Reverend Dr. Willie James Jennings. Born and raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and a graduate of Calvin College, Dr. Willie James Jennings, you see what I did there? Dr. Jennings is the Andrew W. Mellon Professor of Theology and Africana Studies at Yale University Divinity School, where he teaches as a theologian in the areas of Christian thought, race theory, decolonial, and environmental studies. Dr. Jennings is the author of The Christian Imagination, Theology, and the Origins of Race, published in 2010 by Yale University Press, a work which is widely regarded as one of the most important books in theology written in the last 25 years. For his work on this book, Dr. Jennings won the 2015 Grawemeyer Award in Religion, which is one of, if not the most significant prize awarded in the field of theology and religious studies. In the last several years, Dr. Jennings has authored a commentary on the book of Acts that won the Reference Book of the Year Award from the Academy of Parish Clergy, as well as his recent book, After Whiteness, An Education in Belonging, which won the 2020 Book of the Year Award from Publishers Weekly, was a finalist for the 2021 American Academy Religion Book of the Year in the Constructive Reflective Studies category, and won the 2023 Lilly Fellows Program Book Award. In addition to his teaching and scholarship, Dr. Jennings is a frequent lecturer at colleges, universities, and seminaries, having been selected to deliver a number of prestigious lectures, including the Bampton Lectures at Oxford University and the Hulsean Lectures at Cambridge University. Dr. Jennings also regularly leads workshops at conferences and consults with seminaries and other institutions of theological education through work with the Wabash Center for Teaching and Learning in Theology and Religion, and with the Association of Theological Schools. But most importantly, as he has done all these things that I have just described, he has at every point sought to invite those he has met along the way into what he has called a new reality of belonging, one made possible as the Spirit gathers and reorients different peoples around the body of Jesus. Those who have been his students over the decades, myself included, have discovered that the Spirit was calling them to do new things with new people, drawing them into a community and a journey of joyful struggle in which they would learn what it means to be both creatures and disciples. While his books and lectures can be counted, the lives that have been radically changed by his love and care for those he has taught are innumerable. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Willie James Jennings.
Thank you very much, thank you. I want to thank the brilliant Dr. Jansen for that wonderful and kind and generous introduction. It is an honor for me to stand here as the Green Lecturer for this year. I want to thank him and thank the committee for choosing me. And Dr. Green, it is an honor to stand here to try to represent in a very small way your brilliance, your genius, your leadership for these many years. And I hope that my words today will in part give honor to the incredible legacy that you have established here at Hope College. My friends, I bring you warmest greetings from Dean Greg Sterling, the faculty, the staff, and the students of Yale Divinity School, where I have the joy of serving. As I stand before you, it is such an honor to be in the presence of some dear friends who I've known for many years, and others who, when I look at you and I know that I'm older, and I look at you and I see that you're older, I don't feel so bad. My home is in Hamden, Connecticut, not far from Yale University, and my home is on the land of Algonquin-speaking peoples, including the Mohican, the Mashanet-Tucket, Pequot, Eastern Pequot, the Scatico, the Golden Hill Bagosset, the Niantic, and of course the Quinnipiac peoples. And I am thankful to be on the land that they have shepherded and continue to shepherd for thousands of years. And I'm a part of all those who seek, by the way I live on that land, to honor them. And as your wonderful, my wonderful dear colleague said earlier, to be a part of those folks who want to give the land back. So that is my hope and that is my goal. I also appreciate very much what your provost said, and in fact, it builds so nicely on what I want to talk to you about this afternoon. I want to invite you into your calling. Whether you here identify as a Christian or another religion or no religion, I want you to hear God calling you to a work, to a vocation that is inescapable. It is the work, my friends, the work of building habitation. It is the work of creating dwelling, creating life together. You and I live in a world, as I told the students earlier today, we live in a world not of our own choosing or making. This world, this modern world, modern Western world, was formed in theft. Theft so wide and so deep that it is a struggle to comprehend its extent. This is no secret. It has, however, been easier to accept it, think within it, than to sustain a focus on its historical contours and its ever-deepening effects, and even more difficult, dear friends, maybe even impossible, to think and live against it. And imagine a world that might be formed, against its legacy. But that is exactly what I'm inviting you to do this afternoon. I'm inviting you to hear today a calling, that's the only language I could think of, a calling to live against the legacy of theft. That legacy is a massive, almost incomprehensible collection of malicious acts of thievery of land and body, the taking of indigenous lands, and the enslaving of peoples native to the Americas, to Africa, and to the other colonies. That legacy has established, among other things, one fundamental idea. One fundamental idea. It is the idea that the world and everything in it can and should and must be owned. That is a vision of owned existence and life lived through propertied relations. And from that idea has formed a social, political, economic, and geographic arrangement that now threatens life itself. From that idea, we have learned to build habitation, build homes, build schools, build neighborhoods, towns, cities, nations. What is often called, as many of you know, the built environment. And we have formed ourselves inside of that idea. We can capture that idea with one single word, possession. Possession. The question I want to consider with you today is, how might you build your life and your living against the idea of possession? I'll begin by saying a few things about that idea, possession, and then I will turn to the problems and possibilities of thinking self-possession. And finally, I will end with what it might mean to build out homes and communities that reverse the legacy of theft. To build places that are indeed holy. Along the way, if you don't mind, I would like to offer a few poems that speak to me about these matters. And I hope they will speak to you, both the poetry of others and a few little things of my own. But first, possession. The idea of possession, my friends, is ancient, but it formed freshly through the new way European colonial settlers saw the world, beginning in the 16th century. To them, and for them, the world became possession in an absolute sense. These Christian settlers these Christian settlers, wherever they went, they saw possession through break, separation, and enclosure. One more time. Through break, separation, and enclosure. Where native groups saw possession through continuum, connection, and overlap. Continuum, connection, overlap. The former, a possession of, the latter, a possession by. One more time. The former, a possession of, the latter, a possession by. The former made a claim on something. The latter was claimed by something. Before, one might possibly, maybe even say, make a claim on something. This is no small difference. Being claimed means everything. I want you to consider that wonderful poem by the Native American poet Joy Harjoy, Harjo. And if you've never read any Joy Harjoy, shame on you. Go get a book today and read some of her poetry. This is one of my favorite poems of Joy Harjoy, entitled Remember. Remember the sky that you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon. Know who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn. That is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away tonight. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You are evidence of her life and her mother's and hers. Remember your father. He is your life also. Remember the earth, whose skin you are. Red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth. We are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal, life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them. Listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind. Remember her voice. She knows the origin of the universe. Remember you are all people and all people are you. Remember you are this universe and this universe is you. Remember all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember, language comes from this. Remember, the dance language is, that life is. Remember. There is no small difference between being claimed by and making a claim on something. Because between these two ways of imagining possession, one world is being destroyed and another world is being created. Between these two ways of imagining possession, one way of forming home and self, forming home and self is being destroyed. And another way of forming home and self is coming into being. Being claimed by means that your specific environment, the plants, the trees, forest, animals, the bodies of water, the shape of the landscape, the shape of the seasons are not simply things you experience, but they speak to you and they speak through you. They speak not like we speak to one another. They communicate through how they shape the way we live with them. The rhythms of life they invite us to habit, attending to their ways, adjusting our actions to align with their living and their thriving. For so many native peoples, it was the elders of their people who taught the younger generations the practices honed over many years of how to pay attention and listen to the land and in the land, because they were related to the land and the animals as family. And the family held them, claimed them. The colonial settlers, on the other hand, they did not share this sense of being claimed. Their sense of possession grew out of their belief in their centeredness. That centeredness, on the one hand, led them to conclude that God had given them the task of bringing the new worlds to maturity, to mature the body, the soul, and the environment, to make them all productive and able to yield their proper fruit in due season, to quote the old King Jimmy. That centeredness, on the other hand, it led them to believe that God had given them the task to bring rational order to the new worlds. And out of that sense of centeredness, my friends, grew the idea and then the reality of whiteness. What is whiteness? How many times over the last 25 years have I asked that question and had to answer that question? What is whiteness? It is always a challenge to explain whiteness, because for so many people, especially in this country, but not only in this country, to critique whiteness, to speak of whiteness, can feel like a form of hate speech. Whiteness, as I always like to say, and for students, if you're taking notes, write this down. Whiteness is not phenotype. Whiteness is not biology. Whiteness is not a part of creation. And whiteness is certainly not, most important, the design of God. We should never collapse whiteness onto the bodies of people of European descent who self-identify as white people. Because whiteness is a way of being in the world. It is a way of seeing the world and a way of being recognized in the world all at the same time. A way of being in the world, a way of seeing the world, and a way of being recognized in the world all at the same time. Whiteness is a way, I'll go slower so you can write this down. Whiteness is a way of materializing one's desire to order the world. One more time. Whiteness is a way of materializing one's desire to order the world through possession at the horrific cost to people. Whiteness is a way of materializing one's desire to order the world through possession at the horrific cost to people. When you combine the desire to control a world with a sense of responsibility to order the world that you believe is rooted in the will of God, with a reality of power over people, and you add theft, mix it all together, and you get whiteness. Another poem, if you will. This is one of my own. And it's entitled, those of you who know the Bible, you can guess where this is from. It's entitled, Will a Man, I use that word on purpose here, will a man rob God? Malachi, oh Malachi, answer your own question. Fear the answer you will hear in the deafening mourning mixed with laughter accumulated on ships bursting of flesh and gold, in the tears that match the ocean year by year, watering the soil for unprecedented growth. In the building, we appear formed of claim, minds born of lines, tattooed and with boundary and border. Do you hear? Do you hear covenant becoming contract? The erection of monument, grasping forever. My poem, which improvises off of Malachi 3:8, where God tells God's people, Israel, that they are indeed robbing God, points to the dilemma of a Western world being formed through ownership, my friends. But not just a world, but also a self being so formed. You see, the colonial settlers and their children did not see the places they inhabited, the lands, the plants, the animals, the seasons, and the landscapes as the indigenous people saw it, as I just said a moment ago, alive, animate, and communicative. They did not see it as woven into their very lives, as the native peoples did. They did not see it as a fundamental, irreplaceable part of how one understands and identifies oneself. They did not see it as making a claim on us. They saw the land as property that could and should and would become private. Property that one may grow a deep attachment to, one may honor, one may protect and live virtuously upon it, even form a loving connection after you own it. And they pressed, I need a stronger word, they forced indigenous peoples to see the land and think the land and speak the land through a private property vision of ownership. This meant that the land should be first seen in terms of its potential, and thereby seen as a site for improvement. And secondly, as commodifiable, that is, turned into segments and sold. And third, the land should be seen as transferable as sellable segments. Indigenous peoples, to stay in any way connected to the land, would have to see the land in these ways and see themselves as owners of the land, having the rights to the land. But indigenous peoples had not only to see land as property, but they had to articulate land and themselves in the same way that the colonial owners saw it, as the same way anyone who entered the New Worlds had to see it. They all had to see it the same way, through ideas of ownership, which would mean that they entered a pedagogy of the land, now turned into something else, to the point that when people would look out on land, look out on the world, the first question that anyone would ask, the first question that anyone here would ask when they look out on land, the very first question would be, who owns this? Now, none of this is new historical news, but we have not carefully considered the effect of a world configured within ownership, within possession. We are now deep into our problem, a problem that affects the work of seeing and the work of building, especially in the creating of home and a self and the shaping of housing, life, and land. That work draws us into accepting the constituting reality of theft and brings us to a compelling invitation, my friends. What is that invitation? I'm so glad you're listening so carefully. What is that invitation? Claim yourself. Claim yourself. Like land thought through possession, self-possession yields a deadening imaginative range. Either own yourself or allow someone else to possess you. Either own your own labor or allow someone else to possess your labor. Own your own land or either live on someone else's land. Own your own voice or lose your voice. This is our world constituted in propertied existence and expressed through ownership, aiming our lives always toward possession, always toward possession. Working for self-possession has been with us now in earnest since the founding moments of modern colonialism, as people all over the globe are fighting within and against nation states and corporations for self-determination of life and land. We are caught between whiteness and possession. This was powerfully expressed in those famous words by W.E.B. Du Bois in his important essay, The Souls of White Folk. If you've not read that essay, students, you must go read W.E.B. Du Bois, The Souls of White Folks, where he stated these incredible words, and I quote, but what on earth is whiteness that one should desire it? Then always, somehow, some way, silently but clearly, I am given to understand that whiteness is the ownership of the earth forever and ever. Amen. W.E.B. Du Bois wrote these words in 1910. And in that 1910 essay, he was prescient in his account of whiteness and its deep connection to not only ownership, but to shaping the way we understand life. I was made to understand. That is, the way we have shaped education, an education that reaches down into the body, to bone and dirt, as I like to say. You see, my friends, Western education, your education, especially Christian education, was built between whiteness and possession. It all goes back. It all goes back to the desire of the masters and the dreams of the plantation master. That man's dreams, the colonial master's dream, it was elegant, dear friends, elegant and efficient in pulling forward ancient strands of ambition. Imagine, let's play this out, Imagine that you have come into possession of lands and waterways, plants and animals, minerals, precious stones, and let's not forget, people. And you begin to build a productive place. You have learned your Lockean lessons from John Locke, your Lockean lessons. What I cultivate, Locke said, I own with God's approval. And now, after you've learned your Lockean lessons, you are realizing profit. You are realizing power that you and your ancestors in the old world never imagined. It is then, the slave master's thinking, it is then that you look at the world you are creating, and at the same moment, you look at the children that you seek to cultivate, the world that you are creating and the children you seek to cultivate, and you ask the question that will join those two creations in progress. Who must my sons and my daughters become in order to inherit my world and continue to build it better? Who must they become in order to inherit my world? Continue to build it better. Your question travels into your children like genetic coding, making them susceptible to a tragic answer. Who must they become? They must become the embodiment of whiteness. That is, they must become white, self-sufficient men able to show in body and mind, action and reaction, control mastery, and possession. They must be able to control their passions and urges, their anger and enthusiasm. And they must be in possession of strong minds and bodies, and able to maintain possession of what they have been given and what they will inherit. And they must be prepared to face the unknown with a commitment to its mastery, and from one obstacle to the next, to go from mastery to mastery. They must show, in other words, they must show their finish. They're finished, that they are finished. Like a beautiful, beautiful desk, a wonderful table, show their finish. This finish is a beginning to life with power, a life that begets power, aims for profit, shoots for productivity, and a promise to be a builder. The children of the master will seek a becoming and thereby will aspire to a finish. Now listen, dear friends. All of Western education, all of Christian higher ed, is formed between the dream of the colonial master and the aspirations of his sons and daughters. What does it mean to be inside someone else's dream? What does it mean to be inside the aspirations of another? And what does it mean to be educated between dream and aspiration? So this legacy of dreaming men, first it's men, dreaming men who attain power and can handle power, became so compelling and intoxicating for educational institutions and educators. Let me offer another poem for you, another one of my own, entitled Windows. I'm gonna think about what I just said now. I'll say it again. So this legacy of dreaming men who attain power and can handle power became so compelling and intoxicating for educational institutions and educators. Please, fear poor men who are smart. Be terrified of bright women who were raised in lack. These people are dangerous inside thinking walls, where they feel the power of thought and can make them passless and thoughtless. Free now to rationalize their hungers, they are fit for making walls, destroying doors for all who might take their gain and return them poor. Their only hope now, those windows not quite fit for the frame, with seeping sunlight and invading cold air, keeping the room feeling outside, so everyone can see their breathing. Remember what I said about intoxication. Like drug addicts whose ways of being in the world have been contorted by the desire for the drug, our ways of being in educational institutions have been contorted by the desire for the finished man, to cultivate students who exhibit control and mastery, and especially possession, to be ready to take possession of whatever they want. This means that your education, whether it carries the label Christian or not, is by default turned toward forming you into the finished man and shaping you for a life of possession and self-possession. I, however, want you to hear a calling to something else, to do something else, that is, to reverse the logic of possession. Now think about this with me through the story of the Gospel of Luke. Luke 19, 1 through 9. That story of Zacchaeus and the tree. The text reads, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man there was named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. Well, a few places in the Bible where they actually named somebody rich. And he was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was. But on account of the crowd, he could not see because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him because he was going to pass by. So Jesus came to the place. He looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. Now all who saw it began to grumble and say, he has gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner. Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much. Then Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house because he too is a son of Abraham. Now, friends, as most New Testament scholars would tell you, this is an idealized tax collector, one who knows that he has defrauded people, who knows that he has enjoyed the privileges of life in the empire, but he also knows that he is in the presence of the prophet Jesus and in the presence of God. Climbing the sycamore tree facilitated his seeing and being seen. And in the story, that climbing is a beautiful precursor to a life that must change. There from the tree, he receives the invitation that Jesus offers to him to commune with Zacchaeus, an invitation that scandalizes Jesus' listeners. Everybody around Jesus knows that Zacchaeus is a sinner. It's one of the few places where everybody says, I may not be a sinner, but I know he is a sinner. They know that he is a sinner, which means they know that he is a tax collector and a thief. But being in the tree, Zacchaeus is in the place where he may sense the gracious giving of God found in that tree, and offered that tree that offered fruit to everyone, shade for everyone, life for everyone. He's in that tree. Zacchaeus responds to the gracious invitation of Jesus with a commitment to justice. He will give to the poor half of what he owns, and he will enter a work of reparation to those from whom he has stolen, giving back 4 times as much. Zacchaeus, in the presence of God, through Jesus, has been drawn into a life of sharing. A life of sharing. He is being called by the Spirit to a new work of shared living and shared creating. There at the sycamore tree, Zacchaeus is becoming aligned in the presence of Jesus with its form of abundant giving. What then would it look like to see from Zacchaeus' tree? It would mean, my friends, that we would crumble ownership from within. It would mean that we would turn our lives toward inhabiting a different vision of possession that harkens back to indigenous knowing and builds from the knowledge that we, like Zacchaeus, are being claimed by God. To move in this direction, to move in the direction of this calling, I think would mean three things, my friends. You know I'm an old Baptist preacher, so I got to end with three things. It's just in me. It's just in me. It would mean three things. First, it would require us to rethink the aim of education at this moment in history, especially at Christian institutions. We have to rethink the aim of education. Students, answer this question, not out loud, but in your intimacy to yourself. Why are you here at Hope College at this moment? Listen, why are you here at Hope College at this moment? The aim of your education cannot be to make you all, no matter your identity, into white, self-sufficient men who embody control, mastery, and possession. The aim must be to form you into people who know how to gather people together, to become the kind of person that no matter what you choose as your vacation, what you choose as your career, what job you hold, that what distinguishes you in your work is that you bring people together who normally would not want to have anything to do with one another. But because of the way you do your work and the way you are in this world, you create communion, you create community, you angle people toward life together that challenges their hostilities toward one another. That is, you articulate by your life that you are claimed by a multitude of people other than your family and your kin and your clan that give witness to the manifold diversity and beauty of God's world. Every student at this school should ask themselves, and every school should ask itself, how are we walking away from the legacy of whiteness in our work? How are we walking away from the legacy of whiteness? How are we challenging a formation toward a life of self-possession that simply deepens the legacy of theft? How are we walking away from the legacy of theft in our education? The second thing required to move in this direction would be to involve ourselves, and for you to involve yourselves in the dreaming, designing, and building of shared habitation where we all might thrive together in justice. We need to work toward a reciprocity between our ways of being in the world and the way we want the world to be and our places of living. This means not only the democratization of design, that is how we imagine and design and build housing, buildings, and living, but also the reconfiguration of housing and buildings, land and living to structure into the built environment itself. Justice, care, concern, support, and love to structure into the built environment itself. Justice, care, concern, support, and love to structure into the way neighborhoods are formed, communities developed, cities created and maintained, exactly the trajectory we see in Zacchaeus' confession, the redirection of practices of wealth accumulation, and the return of that which has been stolen. The way we live in places ought to embody what Zacchaeus has said he would do. Now, my friends, let me just say this, because I can see this in your eyes. I can see this in your faces. It would not be a new thought. Hope I get invited back again, but let me just say it would not be a new thought to argue against private property, or to argue for more communal living, or to press toward a kind of geographic anarchy, a practice of trespassing. Now, none of these things I am ruling out, but what would it mean? But let's just set that aside for a second. But what would it mean to commit ourselves to a life of sharing that would be established in our built environment? A built environment that enacts a reality of being claimed by God and by other people in the communities that surround us, and by the people God is calling us to get to know and come to love. What would it mean to build a world, to build a community that embodies love, not as a personal sentiment, but by the very structure of the environment? It would mean building differently, reshaping the built environment away from the realities of theft and the spirit of ownership. The question we must ask ourselves, friends, if you don't get anything else, you got to get this. The question we must ask ourselves at this point in the history of the Western world is this: has the real estate industry, the way developers do their work, the way architects, civil engineers, city planners, and builders function in modern political and geographic economies, has that way become fundamentally immoral? Fundamentally immoral. Homelessness is never by accident. Homelessness is never a personal issue first. We have to ask ourselves, has something become fundamentally immoral? We must remember that modern colonialism rooted wealth accumulation in the taking of land and the displacement of people. And the struggle over land is the story. It is the story of the modern world. The racial condition formed with the modern geographic condition. Racial existence forms at the reconfiguration of the relation of the body and land. Race has always been a matter of geography. And most race theorists still don't understand this. And we people of faith have often failed to see what is right in front of our eyes. It is a fact that the spirit of ownership has emerged as a tyrannical universal, driving the plague of gentrification, and with it the increase of homelessness, poverty, and despair around the world, placing people in the position of both slaves and masters. The afterlife of slavery is in the ground, and we remain caught in the logics of the plantation, people forced to configure their lives by the ever-shrinking possibilities of affordable housing, having their life energies and precious time slipping like sand passing through their hands as they travel, vast distances between where they labor and where they caress their loved ones and lay their head at night to rest. People caught in but celebrating real estate deals that increase their wealth or simply give them financial stability and security, while simultaneously making it impossible for vast numbers of others to afford the very home they just sold. People brought to their knees in exhaustion and prayer, trying to make their monthly payments for their rent or their mortgage, knowing that they have no room for getting sick or losing their income or finding alternative living. Churches and schools selling their property, turning over their buildings and their lands to real estate brokers and developers to live another day, sing another hymn, pray another prayer, teach another student, and all of it made possible by yielding to that spirit and claiming the power of ownership and being pressed to operate in what I call a false pneumatology, the spirit of ownership. Even while they pray, "Come, Holy Spirit." And schools, colleges, and universities functioning either in a happy oblivion to these matters or fully engaged in being tyrants when it comes to land and property by driving gentrification, shutting down options for affordable housing, training students to function in the world as though where they live and how they live are inconsequential and amoral. My friends, this is unsustainable. It is unsustainable. The third thing required to move in this direction is to honor the land and the indigenous people who struggle for the land. We honor the land by first learning the long story of the places we inhabit. Who was here before this land was transformed into a thing to be bought and sold? Who is yet here who knows that before? That is, where is the knowledge and memory and voice of indigenous people in the ongoing thinking of life in this place? What work of reparations can be done, and what form of sharing can be imagined and enacted to that end? To that end, my friends, we need to grow things. We need to grow things, especially food. The question we must ask ourselves is, how might we align our living in this place with the abundant living the land can provide, and return offer ourselves in nurturing our places of living? I am talking about more than just farming, though I am talking about some of farming. I am talking about food. I'm talking about food and providing food for people in ways that transgress border and boundary, forming communities that plant and tend, harvest and share as part of their living, communities that end food apartheid, because that exists in this country, and challenge the uneven and even immoral distribution of good foods to poor communities. Now, as I close, let me just say, the way forward for us would involve many things, including many steps and starts. But it would begin with a decision to subvert the idea that we own anything, to transform the contractual into the covenantal by living the truth that we are claimed by God. It would be quickly followed by a commitment to the logics of what I'm calling kinship, by forming built environments structured in sharing. Such sharing is, in fact, the prerequisite to a freedom that is not fleeting or subject to what we possess or what we hope to own, but a real freedom. The Holy Spirit invites us to enter the reality of being possessed, claimed by God, and therefore turn toward listening, embedded in building, and building woven in justice. To move in the direction I am suggesting here means that we must enter the arts of resistance to a spirit of ownership that seeks to claim us, drawing us into the endless quest for possession and the endless cycles of wealth accumulation and debt. It is possible to return to where we have never been, to a work of building life together on the ground. It would indeed be a work of building a holy place. Allow me to close then with one final poem poem of my own, entitled Building New Babel. Let's try this again, but now with noise, a cacophony of voices that none of us can control. We need that destroying God, who made all this happen, threw away our plans, and sat down in our midst. You, God, speak to each of us. We can now only speak through you to one another and understand what and how to build with what stone, which wood, whose cloth, whose hand, which eye, whose feet, which arm, every mind, each hope, climbing higher. Nothing will be wasted. No one will be thrown away. Then we will say to one, as one, we have built together only what you wanted, what you desire to see. You in your home. Thank you very much.
We do have some time for question and answer. Dr. Jennings has graciously agreed to field questions. We have a microphone here and a microphone there in each of the aisles. If you have a question, please feel free to come down and ask it. And if there are Hope College undergraduates who would like to go first, please know that you are specially invited to come and ask a question. I see you, Sophia. Come on.
Thank you for this amazing talk. My name is Sophia Rosenberger. I'm an undergraduate student and junior here at Hope. I have a quick question about how you view this possession and dominion of the earth that we understand is found in other ancient civilizations. Do you view this as an immediate disorder of the fall, or do you find that this is something that's revolutionary and something that's only become a concept from the point of colonization forward, and why?
Great question. So, let me see if I can summarize it. You tell me if I got it right. So you were asking me, do I see this matter of domination and possession of land as something that goes back to the fall, or is it more of a recent development? Now, that's a great question. So, I said this in chapel, greed has been with us from the very beginning. And kingdoms rising and taking other people's lands and enslaving other peoples have been with us from the beginning. But something more is afoot now. It's not simply the taking of land, the seizing of people. It's the transformation of what it is. It's the thinking of it no longer as alive and animate and connected to us, but in a sense, the turning of it into a thing. The word you've already heard, those of you who are here at college, you've heard the word commodity already. So it's the turning of land into a thing. And it's the turning of the body into a thing. And it's the separating of the body from the land. With this strange idea that all of us have been taught to accept, which is new in the world, by the way. That you can define who you are, understand who you are, solely by your body. That is a strange new development. One of the things that occurs over and over again when you read the accounts of missionaries anywhere in the world when they first come and they ask people who they are. And many of them expect a quick answer. I am John Smith. I am so-and-so. And what so many indigenous peoples would do was tell them a story. And the story would involve the land, and it would involve animals, and it would involve season, and it would involve the sky gods, it would involve the water, it would involve the rain. And the colonial missionary or the colonialist is sitting there listening. Okay, I just want to know the person's name. They're telling you their name. Because who they are is inseparable from this. But we have been taught, the pedagogy, the damnable pedagogy we've been taught, is to identify ourselves apart from anywhere. And for so many of us, where we live is absolutely inconsequential to how we see ourselves. And what I have to get across to you, dear friends, is that that is a sickness in us. Because where you are should become fundamental to who you are. But it does not. Now, there's much more that can be said there, but let's take some more questions because I was about to jump into this deep pool, man, so just let me not jump into it. Another question, students, come on. I'm only here for a little while, so come on down. Please.
Hello. I wanted to ask.
Tell me your name.
Oh, Daniel Hernandez, Alvarenga. I wanted to ask if you thought whiteness in the United States is kind of like, is it unique to the global structure of whiteness, or would you say that it's like basically all the same?
Well, the great question. The question was, whiteness in America, is it unique to America, or is it a part of a kind of the global structure? Another great question. It is both. It has its own characteristics, but it's also part of a global reality of racial reasoning. What distinguishes whiteness in this country is the ongoing work of trying to make it invisible. As I said earlier, for so many people to simply say the word white feels like hate speech. Why? Because for so many people in this country, they have so deeply identified with whiteness that they can't see a distinction. When I was at my former institution, I used to teach a course on race, and sometimes I would write the word white on the board, and I would just start touching it with my finger, and students would jump every time I touch it. White, white. I said, why are you jumping? It's just a word. But the identification is a historical phenomenon, and it goes back to immigrant transformation. The great Mark Knoll, the historian at Wheaton College, for many years, he once made a statement that was just so important. He said, there was a time in America when you walked down the street and the last language you would hear would be English. The very last language you would hear would be English. You'd hear everything else. So people who came to this country, immigrants who came to this country, entered a process of immigrant transformation to become white. Whiteness was an accomplishment. And so with that accomplishment, the joy was to actually have children who did not know the old ways. They just knew themselves as American. There was a book written many years by the historian Karen Boykin called How Jews Became White. It was a part of a number of books, how the Italians became white, how the Polish became white. But this book was so wonderful because she told the story of the grandmother. And she could mark the transformation of a people by what happened to the grandmother. So she said in the first generation of an immigrant family coming to this country, grandmother would be out if they had a place to stay, grandma would be out on the porch and would greet the visitors and speak in the old tongue, and the visitors would speak back in the old tongue, and then they would come into the house. The next generation, grandmother might be inside in the foyer or someplace, and the folks would come in, and when they got to the door, they were speaking English. When they stepped in the door, they started speaking the old tongue, and they would speak to the grandmother, and they would come in to have a meal. To the next generation, when grandmother was in the kitchen and not at the dinner table, and then they would come in and everyone's speaking English, They would be speaking English, and then before the company left for the day, before they left for the evening, the mother or the father, not the kids, would go into the kitchen and speak to the grandmother in the mother tongue. To the last generation, she said, when grandmother was in a back room and the daughter would come to the room before the dinner and say, we have company coming now. Don't come out because your English isn't good. And company would come and they would enjoy the evening, and grandmother would be in the back room. So that they were distancing themselves from their immigrant past. Another historian said so beautifully that for so many people, the joyous day came when the children did not know the mother tongue, did not know anything about the old world, only knew that they were American. So whiteness here has that character. It's work in denial and forgetfulness. If any of you saw that movie, I always used to tell people, remind people about this movie. There's been three of them now, but the first one, My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Anybody see that? Great old movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding. There's that scene in the first one where the young man's family had met the Greek family, and the daughter was deeply embarrassed by her Greek family, and she's lying on the bed crying, thinking that, there's no way he's going to marry me. And the mother climbs into the bed with her. And then she says, I'm paraphrasing now, but this is what she says. She says, you have to understand your family. Then she says these words, when everyone else came here, they gave up being Greek, but we did not. Then she went on and said a bunch of other things. And, someone like me, I quickly picked that up because what she said in 2 sentences was a history of horrible, painful transformation. In 2 sentences, when we came here, everyone else gave up that, but we did not. So whiteness in this country has that reality. The Faustian bargain, you want to be American, you need to be white. You want to be accepted, you need to be white. You need to form yourself toward whiteness. And the old country and the old ways, they are fine as long as they do not get in the way of you being white or being American. Great question. Next question.
Hello, my name is Levi Sargent. I'm a freshman here in the Phelps Scholars Program. And my question was, how do you think the continued urbanization of the U.S. has affected our current ability to find place and space and continue the good work of interfacing with the land?
So say that again. I missed the very first part.
Yes. How do you think the urbanization of the earth has affected our ability to find place and space and kind of interface with the land still?
Great. Everybody catch that question? It's a great question. So, from the very beginning in this country, the work of theft was also a work of, as I said in my talk, transforming the way people would look at the land. And so it worked beautifully in this fundamental way. It taught us to see land, no matter what it is, as private property, as that which should be owned, and then to think about the possibilities of building life from on top of that reality. It also then turned that into a fundamental plank of U.S. foreign policy, that our goal was to invite the rest of the world into exactly that kind of calculation. And so we have, in many ways, led with the military and with real estate, trying to help people not simply make their land more productive, but fundamentally transform the nature of how they understand the land and themselves as a prerequisite to being formed inside nationalist visions of life. And so we can't say it's a hindrance, because to say it's a hindrance would say that it was blocking something else. We have to recognize that this is the trajectory born of a Christianity that imagines what it means to mature a place is to turn it into property. That is one of the gifts that we gave. Yes, another question. Okay, please, come on. Yes, please, pull a mic up.
So my question is,
First, tell me who you are.
I'm Cairo.
What year?
I'm a freshman undergraduate.
Wonderful, wonderful.
For communities, families, and foreign countries that reject whiteness and protect their upbringings and culture, what teaching or values allow them to do that, and what should we take from them?
Say it again a little bit slower, because
Okay.
I'm getting a little slightly older. Say it again.
I said, for communities, families, and foreign countries that reject whiteness and protect their upbringing and culture, what teaching or values allow them to do that, and what should we take from them for the next generation?
Oh, great question. Let me repeat it back. So for communities and peoples that seek to protect their culture and resist whiteness, what practices and advice would I have for them to be able to do that? Did I get you right?
Yeah.
All right, great question. So all over the world, people have been fighting this from the very beginning. And so what do? They hold on to their stories. They deepen their commitment to their cultural practices. They seek to establish some borders and boundaries around their land, but all of it is inside, in some ways, having to enter into the logics of possession in order to do it. And so what so many people realize is that in order to fight this, they cannot simply, to use the quote from the great Andre Lord, they cannot simply use the master's tools to try to dismantle the master's house. They have to create new tools. And they have to join with other people to find different ways to think about how they would not only honor their peoples and their practices, but sustain them into the future. And here we as Christians could be so helpful, because as I always like to say, what it means to be a Christian is to expand our identity, not take over someone else's identity, but expand our lives into others. It is crucial that we understand what it means to join as a Christian. You see, it's not the most important thing that I love my people and honor my people, know their stories, know their practices, honor their stories, honor their practices. The most important thing is that you do, and I do the same for you. That carrying forward your story, carrying forward the hopes and dreams of your people should become part of my hope and dream, and vice versa. And together we weave a new kind of shared dreaming, a new kind of shared holding on to memory and story, so that what emerges is the new that did not eradicate the old, but that the old formed into something new, that everyone can hear not only their voice, but their voice anew. And that's what we need. But of course, that takes some courageous people to do that. People who would actually follow what we find in the book of Acts, in Acts chapter 2. Tongue speakers who speak the languages of others. So I think we have time for one more question. Is that about right, Andy brother? Yes.
Hi, my name is Zion Glenn. I am a transfer student here, and most of everyone in this room actually already knows me, and I have a dream.
What year are you saying?
Transfer sophomore.
Transfer, okay, great.
So my dream involves something that you mentioned, which is creating community. So my question to you is, how does someone do that? Do you have to be a leader, someone who's charismatic and a good person, or something under those lines? And can something like that be taught?
Yeah. Did everybody catch the question? So he said he has a dream, something like what I was announcing, but the question was, how do you become that? How do you do that? Do you have to become a leader? Well, no, not really. You know, in the book of Acts, ordinary Christians, when the Spirit comes, they are asked to do what they don't want to do. That's the sign of the Spirit. Being asked to do what you don't want to do. And the main thing they don't want to do is to go be with other people they would prefer not to be with. People they fear, sometimes people they hate. My favorite story in the book of Acts is the Ananias story, the one that's tied to Saul become Paul. You know that story? Oh, okay, you look it up. But this story, so there's this guy named Saul who's killing Christians. I shouldn't laugh, but it's funny. So, this guy named Saul, he's killing Christians, just killing them. And the angel of the Lord comes to this guy named Ananias. And the angel comes from God and says, Ananias, there's a servant, I have a servant named Saul. I need you to go to him. I need you to go to him. And Ananias says to the angel, rumor has it that this guy's a killer. Are you sure God wants me to go to him? That's my favorite story. This guy said to the angel, you might want to let God know that this dude is a killer. And you want me to go to, I can imagine the angel going, man, this dude, I'm from God, dude. So he's an ordinary person, as far as we know. But he's asked to yield to the Spirit. And so, my wonderful student, the question is, how might you yield to the Spirit? And how might you think about yielding to the Spirit as fundamental to your intellectual formation here at Hope? Not what happens in chapel when you pray and lift your hands, that's cool. But yielding to the Spirit is deeply embedded in your intellectual formation. And what you have to ask yourself and ask your professors is, how is this activity deepening my yielding to the Spirit? You want to press that question on your faculty. You want to ask them every semester, how is this class, how are we in this class as we think hard about this matter? In what specific ways is this deepening our ability to yield to the Spirit? So that you don't think the Spirit in terms of piety and the intellectual life in terms of something else. Because what we find in the book of Acts is that these folks are being invited into deep thinking and deep living. It's one thing by the Spirit. And I think that's a good place to end my talk. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much.